I think a lot of people who start West Marches games might not do it, and this actually includes myself. I think a lot of people who start West Marches games might not do it because of the reason Ben Robbins originally started his experiment. For instance, when I started Shifting Sands, it was more because um, I wanted a less. I wanted to put more effort into the stuff up front and less of it over time. You know what I mean? Instead of having to build stuff as I more stuff as I go, I wanted to be able to put a bunch of stuff up front and then have less work. It's not no work by any means. Like, there's definitely work every time you run a session, but I wanted to be able to like not have to be able to put as much work in between each session, and I also didn't want to have to commit to a um a weekly game because I am a very busy person and it's very hard for me to find the time to commit to a game, but I still wanted to game master because I love game mastering. So this was kind of like a happy medium for me. And it for me, it wasn't out of apathy or anything like that. I think that was Ben Robbins' reason for the experiment, but I think a lot of games actually, West Marches games out there, like on Discord and whatnot, are actually not because of apathy. They're because people saw this idea of having a bunch of players together and they just thought it was a cool idea. It's the hot thing to do. Or they're like me and they just don't have a lot of free time. And this was kind of a way to say, okay, players probably don't have a lot of free time either. So let's put the onus on them and say, hey, when do you guys want to play? And you say, and if I can match that, then yeah, we can play that day. But it doesn't have to be a consistent once a week, once a month, bi-weekly thing that everyone has to commit to. It's a lot more flexible, I think, and that's my reasoning for starting West Marches game. And I feel like my gut tells me that kind of reasoning, or like I said, the idea that just it's a bunch of people playing together, are probably the more common reasons than Ben Robbins' reason of apathy.
So, in addition to starting up a West Marches game, I I don't recommend starting a West Marches game with a new group. Kind of like jumping back to where I was saying, you already had our group to pull from,
Mhm.
and you already had the people that I had recruited into my game.
Yeah.
You already have your friends on the side, from like the places you've lived. You've got your work friends. You've got like our particular group that we had going. So you had people to pull from when you got your West March style going. And so I'd like to, for anybody who's thinking about running West Marches, you need 10 to 14 people to run a smooth West March campaign. And if you start off with just 4 or 5, it's not going to really feel very West March ish. It's going to feel just like an irregular game meet.
Yeah. And
which
actually,
totally cool.
our game, even though we had a lot of people in the Discord, the first few sessions were really the same people. So it ended up
All of our
feeling kind of
repeat
like
players.
yeah. And then we started to get more people who come in and were interested in playing more often, so that we could like spruce up the parties a little bit, change things up. But there was still usually at least a couple people who are in every session just because they really wanted to play. And that's fine. I mean, you'll have people like that will really eager to play. They want to try out different characters. That's one of the things West Marches actually does really well, is that it lets you play test things really easily. Because if it doesn't work, you just don't do it again. Or if you build a character you don't, you think is cool, but then it doesn't really work out in play, you can just not play it again, kind of deal. So I think that's one of the actual interesting things about West Marches. But Jackie's right in that it is really hard to get started with a West Marches game. And also, I think, as I mentioned before, one of the misconceptions I think is that West Marches games are easier on the GM. And in fact, like I mentioned, I kind of felt this way. It might be this way too, which was one of the reasons I started West Marches. And it's really not. There's a lot of work up front. First of all, you have to build out whatever the setting is, right? Like Ben Robbins, he had West Marches. You might I was kind of ambitious with mine, and then it started out as sort of a mega dungeon / West Marches, so I had to build the mega dungeon, or at least most of it, right, the high level of it, and then I had to build the setting that was in. Luckily I have a world that I have been building for a long time, and this particular region hadn't saw much love, so it was a good chance for me to kind of flesh out this region of the world, and kind of introduce new things to it. So that was kind of fun. But there's a lot of work that goes into preparing for a West Marches game. And in fact, I will probably do a video, like a stream or a video or something, where I show how I go about planning, how I went about planning the start of the West Marches game, but also how I plan each session. Because one of the misconceptions I had is that it would be less work in between sessions, which is not actually true either. Even though I did built all that world up from the get-go, there's still a lot you have to do in between sessions because it's such a player-driven game, right? You don't know where the players are going to go next. They're going to tell you what they want to do. So you either have to have all that stuff figured out ahead of time, which is a lot of work, or you need to, which is slightly easier work, but still a lot, is you need to listen to what they want to do, have the time between when they say they want to do it and when you play to flesh out that bit, right? And then perhaps the even harder part is that once you flesh out that bit and once they play through it, now you have to find a way to connect it back to everything else to make the world seem realistic, right? Because if they go through this dungeon, right, and something happens, now that whatever happened is shared amongst everyone in your West Marches game. So now you have to figure out, okay, so the state of the world is like this. After the players do this thing, now the state of the world is that, right? Now I have to keep track of that. And now another group of unrelated players come in with unrelated characters. Now what do they do, right? They know, probably they know that the state of the world is now this, but they have to figure out something else to do. So you constantly have to put things in the world for them to do. Otherwise, everything's going to be exhausted, and no one will have anything to do. And I think Jackie, when we first started the game, you kind of brought me to the realization that quest boards are a great way to do this. Even if they're just simple like fetch quests. Like I was trying really hard not to introduce like stupid quests, but sometimes those fetch quests can actually be the spark that triggers them to want to visit somewhere, right? It can be the thing that motivates the players and their characters to embark on some adventure, right? It could be they're like, okay, well, this quest says they want X item, like furs or something, right? Well, I don't know exactly where furs are, but over here it says there's hunting grounds. So something over in this direction probably has furs. So, is there a dungeon over there? Or maybe is there a what I call it, a lair over there where there's like a big monster or something? Maybe we'll find something over there. So let's check out the map and see what's over there. And I think that's the kind of thing you need as a wing, is you need something to spark the player's motivation to do things.